So let's continue with chapter 2 by looking at compounds. So compounds are divided into two groups, organic and inorganic. And the definition of organic, as you think, isn't, nice and healthy, but the chemical definition of organic is molecules made with carbon as a backbone. Carbon. So we'll look at organic molecules a little later on. So let's look at inorganic molecules. And inorganic molecules are molecules that are essential to life. And other than carbon dioxide, which is an exception of it, there are other molecules and the molecules not made of carbon. What I want to look at is the main molecule in the body that's very important is water. 50% of the adult's body is made up of water. And water has these interesting characteristics due to the fact that it has to do with that polar bond. So if you remember, here's an example of the bonds. So here we have the oxygen, which is the red part. Remember that oxygen has a high polarity holding the electrons tighter, so that makes it slightly negative. Then you have the hydrogen with their electrons being pulled away for them, make them slightly positive. So what you get from that is this hydrogen bond of the hydrogen of one molecule being attracted to the oxygen molecule of the other, the oxygen atom of the other molecule. And that's very important when you look at the interaction of water. So water has three main properties according to this textbook. It is a solvent, which means it will dissolve other substances, and that has to do with the polarity of it. It will also dissolve gases, but not as effectively. Water acts as a lubricant to have moisture on film, such as inside the lungs, and also inside your joints. You have water acting as a lubricant. And then because water has something called a high specific heat capacity, that means it takes energy to break apart those hydrogen bonds. So as a result, it does not change temperature quickly. And because it doesn't change temperature quickly, that makes water very good at helping keep the water stable. So that is the property of water. Now, when we look at, there was a video called The Property of Water, which is later on Blackboard. Have a look at it because it goes into the detail and talks about how water is a universal solvent. It goes into more detail. Water is a universal solvent. Water is a very good lubricant. Water is also high specific heat capacity. So that's what we're looking at in terms of water. To continue on with the interesting properties of water, we're going to jump to chapter 20. And in chapter 20, it talks about the body at work and some fascinating introduction of water. Now, later on in chapter 3, when we talk about cells, we're going to look in a little more detail in terms of how water moves. But water is moving by osmosis based on the amount of concentration in different areas. So water we talked about being greater than 50% of your body, depending on what resources. Some people even say it's about 60. But water is available and it flushes. So right here, the body is awash with fluid. It surrounds the cell. It fills the tissue, and it is the main component of blood and lymph. Although the fluid is primary water, it contains thousands of dissolved substances, such as electrolyte, and these are important in the body's biochemical reaction. So let's look at where the water is coming from and where the water is held. So when you look at the body, there is two different categories of water. There's intracellular. Intra means inside, so this is the fluid inside the cells. Then you have the fluid outside the cell. So most of the water, the body's water, resides inside the cells, called intercellular fluid or ICF. The remaining of it is outside the cells, and that is broken into interstitial fluid, which is sort of the fluid in the tissues around the cells. Plasma, which is the fluid in your blood. Lymph, which is the fluid in your lymph cells or lymph vessels. And transcellular fluid. Now, transcellular fluid is sort of the extra fluid around your body. So this is the fluid in your eyes, the fluid in your joints, and digestive secretions. So most of your body's water is intracellular or inside the cell. And this is important because it gets pressure in the cell, and it also provides that the universal solvent for the body. Then we talk about the interstitial fluid, and that is important for helping, again, to transport nutrients to the cell. Then you have the body water is a lubricant, which is used in your transcellular fluid. So that moves your membranes in your lungs so they slide past each other. The fluid in your eyes is there for a reason. And then also, water is very good at keeping your body temperature stable, and that's mainly having to do with plasma, because if you get too hot, your blood will go towards your skin and give off extra heat. Water will move based on concentration gradients. So water will move to places where there is more non-water particles. And this has to do with, instead of using concentration, you use the word osmolarity. So if it has a high osmolarity, that means there is a concentration of non-water particles, so water will move into it. If you have a low osmolarity, then water will move out of it. And we'll talk more about this when we talk about movement in the blood cells or blood tissues, and also movement when we talk about cells itself. Now, how does the body get most water? The main water for the body actually comes from drinking it. You should drink about 2.5 liters a day. So most of it comes from drinking, some comes from food, and some comes from metabolism. Or if you remember, see if I can do this here. We talk about, so you have your glucose. See if I can do this. Not well. I'm using a mouse and I am left-handed, so okay, so if you remember glucose plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide and water. So this is the water that comes from metabolism. As glucose is broken down, the hydrogen will bond with the oxygen and transfer it. So that's how you get water from metabolism. So that's how it goes in. When you go out, most of the fluid in your body is removed through urine, but you also get it from breathing, and that's why your glasses fog up when you're wearing a mask. Your skin in terms of sweating, and also your feces. Hopefully your feces only leaves about 200 milliliters. If your poop's going through too quick, you get diarrhea. Okay? And that's when you have too much water going through your feces. Good. The rest of the chapter goes into detail in terms of how water is regulated in your body. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the kidney and the brain. Basically, you've got receptors in your hypothalamus, and they will control urine input either by causing you to drink more, by activating a thirst center, or acting on the permeability of your kidneys. So we'll talk about those. Okay, so that's pretty much all I want you to know about water. So I will end this now and then continue with part 3 with other molecules. See you soon.